Want you to think to yourself right now, why did you click on this video, right? Do you really think that tips and tricks are going to get you a high score? Whatever score that you're at right now, do you think that tips and tricks are going to improve your score by 100 points instantly after watching these videos and learning them and applying them? Do you think on your next practice test, you're going to get a high score as a result, right? Genuinely pause this video, answer this question to yourself, right? I'm going to tell you why most tips are actually garbage, right? And I found this out the hard way. I, like you, was in your position. I did not have a high SAT score. I had an SAT score that was pretty much the average, like the benchmark that you needed to even be considered for college, right? I think that's about like a 1050 or somewhere around there is like the benchmark score. And I was just slightly above it, right? And the basic concept of tips and tricks, right? Certain ways to look at different specific kinds of problems. That whole idea is garbage. There's no value in doing that, right? The tips and tricks that actually work are going to be methods that you apply, that you practice over a long period of time and get good at, not only because the method itself is a better method than what you were using, but the practice that you have, the familiarity you have with that method, right? That's how you get good with these kinds of tips and tricks. So most tips that just have you do things in a certain order, or read something differently, or skim, don't read, that's garbage. It's not going to help you. And I want to save you that time. So using tips, right, that are a method and a strategy, right, that I've found over a long period of time that work for me, plus a learning strategy to apply those tips and constantly get better at them, that's going to get you a high score. So hi, I'm Karthik. This is tips, strategy, and how to master things for the SAT. Okay, let's get right into it. If you're 650 and below, pretty much this whole video is going to be applicable to you, this portion as well. But if you're not, just skip to the next portion. This part is probably not going to be helpful for you. All right, so if you're 650 and below, your problem lies in two main ideas, right? One, you haven't learned all the concepts that are tested on the SAT. So for grammar and math, that's going to be the specific types of questions and concepts and rules that are tested, right? But for reading, that's going to be something like you haven't been familiarized with the types of questions that are asked, having passages of that level of complexity and the things that they require you to do in the time frame. You haven't really been used to that type of skill yet. And the second idea, right, is not just you haven't learned all the concepts, but you don't have enough practice using those kinds of concepts, right? You don't have enough practice doing those things in an SAT similar format, right? Because I say this all the time. The SAT only measures how good you are at the SAT. It doesn't measure anything else, right? It measures basic skills, but ultimately the way the SAT dilutes and changes them with their specific format makes it so that the SAT measures just how good you are at the SAT. So just practice it and you'll get better, right? So if you start learning all the main concepts, right? For math, learn all the concepts that are tested. And if for grammar, learn every single grammar rule that's on the SAT and all the parts of speech and things that they require, right? And practice those things, just a little bit, you'll cross 650 so easily. This is probably the easiest barrier to cross, just learning the main concepts, right? Doing these two things is just going to improve your score by so much. Prioritize this kind of learning if you're below this stage, right? Quick tips and specific ideas that people are going to preach that are going to get you a perfect score is not. They're not going to be extremely helpful for you in this stage, right? And even though you could apply them and see a slight improvement, that's not going to be the thing that's going to substantially get you out of this range. Okay, so here's are some of those actual tips that I say that aren't particularly helpful, but it's still good to know these because these are the most helpful ones and you should start applying them and getting good with them, right? Get you better at process of elimination. So understand why things can't be correct, right? And understand why things must, between two things, one of them must be correct, right? And that's pretty easy to do on the SAT. There's always two really good answers and two pretty bad answers. So get used to doing that and understanding process of elimination specifically for the SAT. Really extreme words don't work, and questions with that have really similar answers or the same answers don't work as well. So get used to doing that process of elimination for questions you don't know. Also, when you're just starting the learning phase and trying to practice things that you've just learned. Forget timing. Don't worry about time. Just use a stopwatch, see how long it takes you, learn your hardest questions, right? And prioritize them, keep learning them, and figuring out what questions are your hardest ones, learn the skills, and practice them without a stopwatch, right? See how long the problems take you, but just practice without a stopwatch, because timing yourself is just limiting your learning, especially if you're in this score range, right? Your hardest questions should be the things that you prioritize, and use a strategy that works for you, right? I have a specific reading strategy where I like do like almost a full read and then answer my questions like easiest to hardest and then main idea, but that might not work for you. Figure out something that works for you, that's personal to you. Figure out a strategy that works, that you maybe find online, modify by yourself, figure out something that works for you. Okay, so tips if you're above a 650, right? And you basically already have a good understanding of the majority of the concepts that are going to be tested. You either through school or through like practice itself, you now are crossing that range where you need to focus less on learning every individual concept. While there might be one or two grammar rules, one math idea, or one type of reading question that you've never encountered before and you need to learn those, that's not going to be your main priority for 99% of the test. It's going to be mastery, right? How do we go from this learning to this mastery stage? And basically what all that changes is just what you're doing during your preparation. Instead of looking to consult outside resources and learning those specific skills, what's changing is you're just going to be practicing what you already know a bunch of times repeatedly and figuring out every small mistake that you make and correcting it the next time that you do it. You should be focusing on the things that you get wrong the most often, so your lowest accuracy questions, right? You need to, and in order to figure out first what your lowest accuracy questions are, you need to be taking practice tests regularly. Take tests weekly, if not more, but weekly at the minimum, and then grade them and figure out what types of questions that you get wrong, what you miss, right? And when you're not taking practice tests, every other day, you should be learning those skills if they're completely foreign and unfamiliar, right? Like let's say you just never learned about like the circle formula in Cartesian coordinates, then learn that skill, use Khan Academy, learn it, right? But if you do know that skill already, you should be focusing on similar problems and how to solve them. You should be doing problems that use that skill and just doing them again and again and again. It's that rote practice of doing something 1,000 times. That's what gets you perfect, right? It's not some new skill and new tip. It's doing it 1,000 times. Because I guarantee you, if you do it 1,000 times, you will never get it wrong, right? And you don't have to do 1,000, right? That's a very extreme example. But if you just do anything a bunch of times, you get better and you get more accurate. So if you're learning a skill, right, you need to use online resources or consult somebody of experience who knows that in order to learn the problem, right? And for reading, right, this is actually not the case because there's no skill that you specifically need to learn, right? The skill is just knowing how to read and knowing how to understand words. But what you have to do is just get better at that, right? Just practice more of these problems that you miss most often and just run those again and again. Take practice passages every single day because you can't easily measure progress in this area. It's very hard. So you just have to rely on the fact that if you do 1,000 passages, your score is going to increase substantially, which makes sense, right? So going forward, the basic idea of this video is that specific problem tips aren't going to help you. It's just the strategy. It's specific tips, right? But it's the strategy that you use, that you implement those tips and you're constantly retesting and you're focusing on your weakest questions. That's what's going to help you. I hate how most students are just deceived with this idea that tips and tricks are going to help them, right? It's the clickbait video. It's whatever is popping, right? And obviously, like, people use this idea to try to figure out like things that are going to help you, right? People are genuinely trying to help you when they make tips and tricks videos. What they don't understand is that that is not helpful at all. It's just that is not the thing. Even though it could be helpful, it's not the thing that they should be focusing on. They should be focusing on implementing learning strategy, because tips and tricks aren't going to help you. It's doing something again and again over a long period of time. That's what shows results. It's just how long are you going to be doing it for? Are you going to be doing it for 1 month? Can you commit to 2 months? Can you commit to 5 months, 6 months? Can you commit to 8 months? Do you really have that time? Are you going to commit that time? And that's how you get results. That's literally it. I guarantee, like, if you do this method of taking weekly or bi-weekly practice tests, for a couple of months, and then every time you get a question wrong, you practice that specific type of problem throughout the week again and again for at least an hour a day, I guarantee you'll improve by at least 200 points, if not more, if you're starting from under 650, right? I guarantee that. If you apply these methods, that's going to happen. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you learned something today.